Checkmate, religion. This episode of Business Blaze with your boy with the blaze is brought to you by Backblaze. What? Backblaze is an amazing backup service. You've heard me mention it before. Honestly, I'm slightly disappointed in you if you don't have it yet. You can get 15 days for free at backblaze.com/blaze and stop disappointing me. Let's get into the video. What happens here is Danny writes the script. I shout, "This feels light. Maybe this will be a short one." I mean, I always say that. It's like, oh, this feels heavy, this feels light. Maybe it'll determine how long the video will be. And it's actually, no, it's just really based on how much I got to rant about in that particular script. Like how many cues Danny has where I tell a pointless story that mostly bores people and encourage them to smash the dislike button. Danny will write a script, I will read it. Sam will add some fine memes, sprinkle them in there. Like Salt with the dude with the arm and the... What the f*** is that about? Still, I don't know. I found out it's from a restaurant called Salt Bay. It's like, great. I won't be going there. Because I couldn't get a table. This is going to be a long one, I can already tell. Because it's called Crimes the People, open parenthesis, allegedly, close parenthesis, got away with, allegedly. Mr. Bottomley always taught us at school that no crime goes unpunished, and you will one day face the consequences of every crooked caper that you foolishly choose to undertake. Statistically, that is not borne out at all. Like, the odds of you, I mean, first of all, of your crime getting discovered is fairly low. Of your crime then being decided to be pursued by the police, fairly low. Then the crime decided to be pursued by the CPS or whoever you, district attorney, maybe in the United States we have the Crown Prosecution Service, of them deciding to take your case to court, fairly low. Then of you going to court and being convicted of a crime by a judge or a jury beyond all reasonable doubt is fairly low. Statistically, crime pays. Get into crime. Not really. Don't do crimes. Mr. Bottomley was clearly talking out of his surname though. Danny and I, same page. I would do this like I normally do, but I'm holding this coffee, which I have to drink out of the side of my mouth because I was at the dentist and then I bit my lip and I got an ulcer and it's hard to talk. I've got some numbing cream on there, but if I'm talking a bit like this for the whole video, that's why. I can still vividly remember the time when someone took a key to his car and scratched the immortal words, "Mr. Bottomley bums dogs," all down the side of the vehicle. And I absolutely believe this happens because that, I don't know if it's just like a British school kid thing, but like to write bums dogs on there is just like the most 13-year-old thing I've ever heard, and I entirely believe this story. I'm pretty sure that car vandalism is a crime, and I know for a fact that Fat Barry was the culprit. He was exacting his bitter revenge after having his entire stash of chocolate confiscated during class and never returned. Getting his sweets confiscated, like, in class was the worst thing ever. We had these school blazers, right? Sort of like this, like a business blazer. And we'd get, like, from the tuck shop, as we called it, there would be, you know, you could pick out, I feel like, honestly, I'm not like 100 years old, but you'd go in this place and you'd tell them like how many cola bottles you want, and they'd pour them out into a scale and put them in a paper bag for you. I swear I didn't grow up in the 19th century. This was the late 90s, early 2000s. And you'd get like a paper bag, slot it in there, and just in class you could be like, you know, just taking little cola bottles. And I remember once I got busted for it. I mean, many times, because, you know, teachers would be looking out for it, they'd confiscate the sweets and then eat them themselves, those greedy f***s. Or some teachers would then share them out with the whole class, which was equally disappointing. I remember once, and I got busted, and I was like, fuck. But I had a clever trick up my sleeve, because in the other pocket, I had a second bag of cola bottles, but those ones were the cherry fizzy cola flavor. And then the teacher takes them, and he's walking back to the desk, and he turns around and he just says to me, "And the other one from your other pocket." And I'm like, how did you know? I was like, where am I? Where am I in the script? And then I realized I picked up the script from the last video about fake facts that are true. Let's put that down and let's get on with this one. And statistically, it's hard to arrive at any other conclusion than crime pays. I swear to God I don't read these ahead. Of course, it's impossible to get a true handle on the figures because the overwhelming majority of crime is likely to go unreported. But considering that well over half of reported crimes in the US remain unsolved, and only 9% of reported crime in the UK results in anyone getting charged, and that's just charged, not convicted, The odds always seemed stacked heavily in Fat Barry's favor. You're naturally a bit more likely to get away with a crime if you're rich or powerful or Donald Trump. Smash that dislike button. We're getting political. But perhaps the best... Oh, there's a fucking mouth ulcer. Perhaps the best way to guarantee a favorable outcome is to commit a crime in a country in which you've been granted diplomatic immunity. And this brings us to the very recent tussle between the UK and the US over the death of Harry Dunn. I have to say, I've got a new channel called Explored, XPLRD, because I hate vowels, that's how I say it. And we did a video all about how all of the times, like diplomatic bags, which are bags the police can't search because they've kind of got diplomatic immunity of their own sort, we used to smuggle drugs. And one of the examples was like a huge amount of cocaine was smuggled out of Colombia and into Italy or something. And it's like amazing. Subscribe to their channel, why not? And this brings to mind the very recent tussle between the UK and the US over the death of Harry Dunn. In 2019, Harry was only 19 years of age when he was riding his motorcycle in Brackley, a small town about 60 miles northwest of London and very near a Royal Air Force base operated by the US military. Harry was killed when his bike collided with an oncoming car, which was being driven on the wrong side of the road. I vaguely remember this story. I didn't remember the bit about it being driven on the wrong side of the road. Come on, guys. That car belonged to an American woman, Anna Sekules, who just happened to be the alleged wife of alleged American diplomat working at the base. How are you an alleged diplomat? And was therefore perceived to be protected by diplomatic immunity. It's not always the case, is it? The spouse doesn't always get diplomatic immunity. It depends on what level of diplomat you are. If you're like, head of the embassy or ambassador or some shit, then probably. But not always. During questioning by Northamptonshire police, Anne Sekules admitted that she had been driving on the wrong side of the road, and although the subject of diplomatic immunity was brought up, she initially agreed to remain in the UK and cooperate with the investigation. However, very shortly afterwards, she left the UK on a US Air Force aircraft and never returned. That's not good, is it? The UK government requested that Anne Sekules be extradited back to the UK on the grounds that diplomatic immunity was not valid in this case. Anne's husband wasn't apparently even listed as a diplomat, he was just an electrician working at the base. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson even got on the blower to Trump about the case. Holy shit, I'd be like, dude, this is a criminal matter, what the f*** are you calling me for? But the US government wasn't prepared to budge. Trump was asked about the matter during a press briefing, and he came up with very sympathetic words for the bereaved family while remarking that he often found himself driving on the wrong side of the road in Europe. No, he didn't. Did he say that? He shouldn't be driving anyway. This kind of accident is bound to happen when those idiot Europeans insist on driving the wrong bloody way. The camera picked up a slightly blunter message from Trump's briefing notes that he was holding in his hand. Oh yeah, this is so good. Cameras have such high resolution nowadays that it's like, yeah, they just snap a picture of someone from a distance and it's like, yeah, we can now read what's in your hand. The spouse of the US government employee will not return to the United Kingdom. Harry's family later had an audience with Trump at the White House where it staged a little fun surprise for them. Anne Sekules was in the room next door waiting to have a chat. Dudes, no. Trump claimed that he'd arranged this little surprise with Boris, but the UK government denied that they had any involvement with this bombshell strategy. Of course they did. If I was Boris Johnson, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, Trump, that's jolly good. And then it didn't go down well, as of course it fucking wouldn't. I'd be like, no, don't know what he's talking about. Wasn't me. Never suggested it. Don't like it at all. Trump, what the hell? Trump was clearly hoping everything could be resolved over coffee and blueberry pancakes. They killed their son. But Harry Dunn's family refused to meet Anne Sekules on the grounds that they were totally unprepared for a meeting that should be taking place on UK soil. Trump later described his meeting with the Dunn family as beautiful in a certain way. What the f*** is going on? I mean, I don't want to get political, but you can think about Trump whatever you like, but he's not a statesman, is he? This is not appropriate. I know some people are like, oh, well, it's good, we got someone who's not a politician, not a career politician. I'm like, yeah, you know what a career politician wouldn't do? F***ing this. And look, no one can argue that that is a good thing. Of course, this case was no calculated crime, it was a tragic accident. Incidentally, Anne Sekules had received a previous driving infraction in Virginia in 2006 for failing to pay full attention at the wheel. But it's arguably that's a crime. I should pay more attention. I recently got a car. It's got all this technology, it basically drives itself, it's like a Volvo something or other. And you're driving on the highway and you press this button and it's like, yeah. It'll go up to this speed. It'll brake if there's a car in front of you. It'll keep you in your lane. It's just like, okay, I'm going to spend time definitely not checking my phone. Definitely not. But it's arguably criminal how she was allowed to exploit a loophole in the law to escape justice. Still, killing someone through accidental driving is a crime. It's just a less serious crime than intentionally killing someone. It was later confirmed that her husband definitely wasn't a listed diplomat, but due to an oversight, the families of employees working in the Air Force Base were still protected by diplomatic immunity, even if the actual employee wasn't.
Diplomatic immunity!
It's a loophole which has since been closed, but not in time to provide full closure for the Dunn family. One last remaining strand of hope for the family is that incoming President Joe Biden may once again look at the case with a deeper understanding, having lost his first wife and baby daughter to a car crash in 1972. Jesus, I didn't know that. That's fucking brutal. Poor Joe Biden. Also, he had a wife and daughter in 1972. Just a reminder, Joe Biden is old. But it's possible, so's Trump. But it's possible that this could have all been wrapped up very quickly if Anne Sekulas had just stayed in the UK, as she had initially agreed with the police. The Dunn family were aware that Anne Sekulas had a young family and now claim that they would have worked with the police on securing a suspended prison sentence so that she wouldn't be separated from her kids. I doubt they're feeling quite so charitable now. Yeah, I mean, God, I don't really know how I feel about that. Like, if I was in their position, it's like, does she deserve to go to jail for just not paying attention behind the wheel and that resulting in someone's death? I want to jump to no, but then if it was my kid, I'd probably feel differently. Well, good news. This is not the channel where we figure out moral quandaries. It's the channel where I tell you about the legends that sponsor today's video. Backblaze. Look, you've heard me talk about Backblaze before. What is Backblaze? It's a backup solution. I have some notes, but what I'm going to do is probably just, as I always do, I'm going to riff off them. I've probably memorized all the points by now, and I'll just tell you a story of why Backblaze is good. Backblaze, I have it installed on my computer. You just download this app, and then you say, like, yeah, I want to back up these hard drives. And then, I don't know, I never turn my computer off, and I have mad fast internet, so it backs up super quickly, but you can just leave it running. Just leave it running all the time in the background, and every new file you create, everything you download gets backed up to Backblaze's servers. So, you know, you remember in the past you'd be like, oh, I need to back up these important documents to an external hard disk and keep it off-site. With Backblaze, it's like, just chill, bro. It's good, we got you covered, and you might be thinking, oh, but I got loads of files and they're all important. What if someone, you know, is that secure? And it's like, yeah, it's encrypted. Obviously, don't worry about that. And you might be thinking, oh my God, this is incredible, Simon. I must get it right now. It must be insanely expensive. But it's not. It's $6 a month. And they don't even say it in the ad copy, but it's even cheaper. Just buy a year, or you can even buy 2 years, and it makes it even cheaper. I don't know how they do it. It's really cheap, and it's incredible, and you just don't have to worry about backup. Burning shit to DVDs? People used to do that in the past. Stop it. You don't... I mean, okay, so you buy a hard disk, right? How much is a hard disk? $100 for a big one that can back up all your shit? It's like, just get Backblaze. That's 2 years. And then you don't have to worry about, like, copying the shit to the hard disk and taking it somewhere else, and then being like, oh, how up to date is it? All of this stuff. You don't just. I don't understand why you wouldn't. But apparently Backblaze are not as confident as I am, because they're like, okay, look, just in case you're not sure, we'll give you a 15-day free trial. Just in case, that's worth like $3. Oh, but there is a 15-day free trial for whatever reason. You just get it, try it out, backblaze.com/blaze. You will like it. Trust me. I mean, it's not really something you like. I don't know why I say it. It's a backup solution. It's not like, oh my God, how exciting. It's not like Netflix where you're like, wow, I really like this. It's just, you know, something you have to do, and you should, and it's very, very good. I've talked about this enough. 15-day free trial, backblaze.com/blaze. If you haven't got it already, what are you doing? Get your shit together. Dodgy bursting bladders. Some deaths are probably a little more embarrassing than others. You really don't want it mentioned on a full-page obituary in the Scunthorpe Telegraph that you died while eating a Big Mac on the toilet, or that you died from accidentally injecting yourself with bleach. Or you're found slumped over a mobile phone screen displaying lewd photographs of Margaret Thatcher. I did a video, the communism video recently, at least recently as of this recording, and someone was like, Simon, I bet you say a prayer to Margaret Thatcher every night after your comments on unions. And I'm like, no, I just mass. You probably would also prefer not to go down in history as dying from being too polite to excuse yourself for a bathroom visit. But that's exactly what we're led to believe happened in the curious case of 16th century pioneering astronomer Tycho Brahe for hundreds of years. The Danish nobleman, writer, and alchemist played a hugely important role in the foundations of modern astronomy. I like how back in the day, like, even the real scientists were like Isaac Newton was mad into alchemy. He was like, yeah, we're gonna make gold! We're gonna make the elixir of life! Philosopher's Stone. And it's like, well, at least, you know, Isaac, how about you focus on the real science? You're actually good at that. You know, no one remembers you for all this alchemy bull. Catalogued accurate positions of almost 1,000 different stars. He was also known as the man with the golden nose. At the age of 20, he was believed to have lost a big chunk of his nose during a drunken duel with his cousin over who was the finest mathematician. They later made up, but Tio had to wear an early prosthetic nose for the rest of his life, which was reportedly made of gold. What a baller. However, it was an invitation to... It's also got to be really heavy, right? However, it was an invitation to a banquet in Prague in 1601 that would appear to have sealed Ticho's fate. After drinking lashings of fine wine, he desperately needed to visit the bathroom, but feared that it would be improper to excuse himself from the table. So he just held it in for hours. Shortly afterwards, he died from a burst bladder, or so he thought for the best part of 4 centuries. During his final years, he had been assisted in his work by the German astronomer Johannes Kepler, although the relationship between the two was reportedly strained at times as they disagreed over fundamental concepts, and the notoriously secretive Tycho only allowed Kepler limited access to his research. Kepler would also go on to make a name for himself after Tycho's death, publishing what would later become known as the laws of planetary motion, although Kepler himself didn't refer to them as laws. He viewed them as celestial harmonies which reflected God's design of the universe. Yeah, the past. Well, they better fall in with God's plan or we're gonna burn you, heathen. And he's like, yeah, okay. Yeah. The earth moves around the sun because of gravity, and gravity was made by God. Checkmate, religion. But poor Tycho Brahe certainly wasn't allowed to rest in peace. His body was first exhumed in Prague in 1901, partly to perform another autopsy. 300 years later? Just let it go, it's not that important. And partly it seems because people were curious to see his big, fake, golden nose. No conclusive results were reached from the autopsy, and sadly, the golden nose was missing. However, when his body was exhumed again for another autopsy in 1991, Tycho's beard was found to contain high levels of mercury. And this led to the forming of a new theory, that his bladder hadn't burst at all. It was more likely that Tycho had been deliberately poisoned with mercury. And the chief suspect was Johannes Kepler! No way! Kepler as in Kepler. For the next 20 years, it was heavily speculated that Kepler had become increasingly frustrated by the secrecy of his former boss and ended up poisoning him to gain full access to his research and further his own pioneering experiments, according to God's plan. Kepler was like, God told me to do it. And back in the day, they'd be like, all right then, mate, cool. So the path that ultimately led to the discovering of Newton's laws of motion and universal gravitation had been soiled with this dastardly deed, and Kepler had gotten away with murder. But then there was a final plot twist. When Tycho's body was exhumed again in 2012, what the f***? Leave him alone. Everyone's dead. It's not like, yeah, let's prosecute Kepler. It was declared that the levels of mercury found in his beard were unlikely to have been related to purposeful poisoning and were more likely to have formed during the precipitation of mercury dust in the air during his weird alchemistic experiments. So even Tycho, oh yeah, he was into it. Kepler was really into Jesus and shit, but I don't think he was into alchemy, if I remember correctly. I did a biographics video about him, I think, or I've done stuff about Kepler. I've made thousands of videos, it's probably been covered. And there's a bit of disappointing news too. After analysing small bone samples from his nose, it was concluded that the prosthetic nose was actually just made of brass. So although we believe for 20 years that Kepler may have murdered the man with the golden nose, it now seems likely old brass nose died from a burst bladder after all. Still, who knows? What about bumps? When we'll exhume his body next time around, it's probably best not to bother putting him back in the ground. Yeah, stop it, leave him alone. This is why I'm gonna have myself frozen. I don't want people digging up my body. Jerry Lee Lewis, the killer. Just to be clear, we're not making any judgments with the title of this section. The American singer and pianist who hit the big time in the 1950s and 60s boasted quite a few nicknames in his heyday. The flamboyant performer is often dubbed the first wild man of rock and roll, and is widely regarded as one of the most influential pianists of the 20th century. But the nickname that really stuck with him throughout his long career was the Killer, which apparently reflected his wild man attitude towards pumping piano. He still uses the nickname today in his mid-80s, signing off from video messages to his fans with the words, "Lots of love from the Killer." And he still tries to get out on tour whenever he can, although he's not always in the best of shape and perhaps not quite as wild as he used to be. But it's interesting how the singer of Great Balls of Fire, a whole lot of shaking going on. I've heard of Great Balls of Fire, I don't know the others, I've never heard of this guy. By the way, just in case you were like, I bet Simon's really familiar with this guy's music and all sorts of other pop culture. Turns out that's not true.
So that was a fucking lie.
And 3,000 other songs that you've never heard of added to the list, Danny. Managed to stretch out a career spelling well over 50 years, particularly when it seemed to be all over in the early 1960s. This was back when details of Jerry's third marriage had been leaked to the press and whipped up scandal, which led to the cancellation of his upcoming tours and a short spell in obscurity. Jerry, then aged 22, had chosen his 13-year-old cousin to be his lucky dude. What is going on? This might be a bit more shocking to viewers in the UK, where marrying a minor has been illegal since 1929. This should be shocking to everybody. It's perhaps a little bit less controversial to viewers in the US, where it's still technically legal to marry a minor with certain conditions in 25 states. And there are probably some states that still let you marry a horse. What is going on? Also, wasn't he his cousin? His 13-year-old cousin? Aren't you a rock star? You can do whatever the you want. What? Aren't you fucking weirdo? This marriage ended in 1970 when his cousin filed for a divorce on the grounds of adultery and abuse. Jerry's fourth marriage didn't go down too well either. Shortly before divorce proceedings could be finalized on this one, his soon-to-be ex-wife drowned in very mysterious circumstances in a Memphis swimming pool in 1982. But his fifth marriage was even more Dude, you married your cousin, your wife mysteriously died in a swimming pool, and I'm assuming we're going to say, allegedly some went down, allegedly. The fifth one. What the hell happened with the fifth one? Lasting just 77 days, his marriage to Sean Stevens came to an abrupt end when she was found dead in her bed in 1983. Sean is a girl's name as well? I didn't even know that. A coroner quickly declared that she had died from an accidental methadone overdose, and a grand jury was downright hasty in declaring that no crime had been committed. But some things just didn't seem to add up. One of them, allegedly. One of the first paramedics to arrive on the scene claimed that there was blood all over the walls and carpets and the victim's clothes. Shit, you don't get that with a methadone overdose, do you? Shards of glass were scattered around the room, and Sean had bruises all along her forearms as if somebody had tightly grabbed her. A dazed and confused Jerry Lewis had greeted the ambulance crew with two big scratches on the back of his hand, as if he'd just lost a wrestling match with an angry cat. One of the singer's first responses to the death of his latest wife was to mumble, "We need to find out who killed." Then he stops before changing track. "We need to find out how she died." Allegedly, he was found in... Oh, let's just carry on. Very little of this made it into the police report. The deputy sheriff, Jack McCauley, had arrived on the scene and then spent an hour alone with Jerry without ever revealing details of the long conversation that had taken place. Leave that to our imagination. Whatever you're thinking, Jack, we're thinking worse. The young mortician who first examined the body initially reported traces of blood in Sean's hair and under her fingernails, but appeared less forthcoming with details after his dad, the owner of the business, had a word in his ear about the reputation of the firm and the stake in the community. That is allegedly extremely corrupt. And the whole case was rushed through a county grand jury before most of the details relating to the case had even been properly investigated. What's the motivation here? Why are they rushing this through? When the grand jury concluded that no crime had been committed, they had not been informed about the paramedics' account of blood-splattered scene and the very basic forensic procedures that had not been carried out. The details of Sean's final phone call also have not been revealed to the grand jury. The night before she was found dead, Sean had phoned her mother in a state of distress to tell her that she was leaving Jerry just as soon as she could get away from him, but the line had gone dead while Sean was mid-sentence. Guys, I mean, I don't even want to comment because I don't, my opinion would have to be sprinkled with allegedlys, and wow. Just wow. It's of course entirely possible that Jerry Lee Lewis had nothing to do with the death of Sean Stevens, as the court said, Danny. And any speculation that he had the whole county in his pocket could be entirely unfounded. After all, this is a man of great integrity. Yeah, 5 wives. Or he married his 13-year-old cousin. Great integrity, allegedly. A man who had once drove up to Graceland with a gun on his dashboard while completely off his tits, demanding that Elvis show himself and prove he was the real king. Dude. A man who once... he's a famous rock and roll star? Elvis. You know who's not? You. I mean, I guess you're a little bit famous because here you are being covered, but I've never heard of you. I've heard of one of your songs. If anything, I'd describe you as a one-hit wonder. A man who once accidentally shot his own bass player in the chest and admitted no fault, but paid out $125,000 in damages. Dude. Whatever the truth, the death of Sean Stevens was quietly and quickly wrapped up with no sign of foul play. We may never fully understand exactly what happened to the victim, but we do know that the killer was able to get back behind his pumping piano for another 40 years. Apparently, Jerry often worries these days about whether he'll go to heaven or hell when he finally kicks the bucket. Not being religious myself, I couldn't guess either way, but maybe Great Balls of Fire would be quite a fitting soundtrack to have blaring out of the speakers as the curtain falls on the killer for the very last time. Allegedly. This has been Business Blaze, brought to you by the legends at Backblaze. If you'd like to try that out, I'd highly recommend it. There is a link below. Why not purchase a t-shirt as well? Smash the dislike button, this old chestnut, purchasethemerch.co, and thank you for watching. Get into crime.